Before the show started, this week's Monday Night Raw was described to me as chaotic, and by the end of the show, it was downright carnage. With news on Retribution, the changes last minute to the show, including changes made to Payback, Keith Lee, and of course Raw Underground, it's time for the Raw review. The show opened with a mountain of pyro and a couple of match announcements. Sasha Banks would once again challenge Asuka in the fourth match in a month between the two, this time as a lumberjack match. Secondly, Dominic and Rey Mysterio, in a match that was originally planned for Payback, would be facing off with Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy, this match being moved to Raw to free up space from what they now expect to be quite a bloated Payback pay-per-view as well. It seems when they have an overflow pay-per-view a week after a main pay-per-view, they stuff that full of matches too. They also announced that come Payback, Roman Reigns would be challenging The Fiend, and also Braun Strowman would be in the match in a triple threat no holds barred match for the Universal Championship. They go back to this 5 separate occasions, each time calling it breaking news about Roman Reigns. So clearly they think he's going to save all of their asses and fix all of their problems. Drew McIntyre opens the show and cuts a promo essentially saying to Randy Orton, if you want your rematch, you can have your rematch. This was the originally planned segment, and it was also originally planned that Randy Orton would attack Drew McIntyre and punt kick him in the head multiple times. However, it was rewrites that took a third punt later in the night, and Drew McIntyre would be put out of action for Payback, whereas originally there was supposed to be an instant rematch. The show opened with Shayna Baszler versus Bayley, which is a very exciting match, and to be honest, it was a very good match until the storyline kicked in. Nia Jax would come out, attack Shayna Baszler, and then seemingly get bored of attacking Shayna Baszler, and the two would team up to challenge Sasha Banks and Bayley for the Tag Team Championships at Payback. I don't know how they got there. This completely flies in the face of the whole feud, and yet here we are. After a commercial break, the Thunderdome took a few seconds to turn back on. This would be a recurring problem, starting with the audio being far too loud so you could barely hear any promos, and it would just be constantly up and down, audio out of sync, out of key at the wrong times. Thunderdome suffered a lot of problems on this night. My full report is over at Sportskeeda as regards fury backstage. Literally, sources are indicating to me that there was furious people backstage under immense pressure to keep people on those screens while at the same time monitoring every screen to get rid of the fact that so many fans were being absolutely ridiculous in what they were putting on their screens. Aleister Black would return in a Kevin Owens show segment and turn heel by attacking Kevin Owens. If you've been watching the Sportskeeda Raw previews that I do at 5 PM UK time and 12 noon EST on Mondays, you will be fully aware that the heel turn was planned, but to reiterate here, the idea is that Aleister Black as a heel can feud with a lot of new people. That includes Kevin Owens, that includes Apollo Crews, and that includes Drew McIntyre, the current WWE champion. Keep an eye out for that feud later down the road. In what I'm pretty sure is the longest 24/7 championship match in history, Akira Tozawa regained the championship because ninjas. Randy Orton came out to gloat about putting Drew McIntyre out of action, and up steps Keith Lee to challenge him in his Raw debut, which I formally announced on Twitter right after his takeover match when he lost the NXT Championship. We knew this was coming, we didn't know quite how it was going to play out, and this was a late rewrite. Keith Lee was not originally planned to get involved with this feud. What actually happens is, later in the night the two have a match. Keith Lee is made to look very impressive, however the match doesn't go as long as it can. Randy Orton is dragged out and attacked by Drew McIntyre, and Randy Orton eventually gets the upper hand back. Keith Lee will now be taking Drew McIntyre's place at Payback to face off against Randy Orton. That is a very high profile match to start with, even though I don't think he's got much of a chance of winning it. Next up, Mark Henry officiated an arm wrestling contest between Bobby Lashley and Apollo Crews, which was won by Apollo Crews after preventing Bobby Lashley from cheating. Why does Bobby Lashley need to cheat? Why can't someone just be a badass? This is building to their match at Payback for the United States Championship, which I can't see Apollo Crews winning. Natalya and Lana appeared in the ring in what I can only describe as wedding dresses. They mocked Mickie James. Mickie James came out and kicked them and then left. In a very angry mood, Bobby Lashley attacked everyone at Raw Underground. Dolph Ziggler would step up in a strange face role for him that I'm not particularly familiar with. He would get beaten soundly, but not too convincingly, because he is still able to get a few hits in on Bobby Lashley. However, after he is taken out, no one stands any chance at all. At the moment, Raw Underground is being pre-taped, and a lot was cut from this, including multiple matches for the women's division or the women's division within Raw Underground. They will be pre-taping these segments for a long time now. This is going to be the only thing guaranteed pre-taped for the live Raw and SmackDown era, so we can expect to see lots of changes coming to this as they are presented late on. Shane McMahon, to my knowledge, is not happy with the cuts that were made, especially considering how late in the day they were cut. Sasha Banks takes on Asuka in a lumberjack match for the Raw Women's Championship. This match essentially comes down to Shayna Baszler getting involved, preventing Bayley from actually interfering, and thus Asuka can win sort of clean. It's the cleanest win Asuka has ever had as Raw Women's Champion. Sasha Banks throughout the night looks despondent, distraught and disappointed. It's very hard for me to watch because it really evokes an emotional reaction when it's someone like Sasha Banks who seemingly is impervious to feelings. Very good job on the acting. I was very impressed. There is certainly a lot more storyline to play out there, but I do feel this will be Sasha Banks' last appearance on Raw for a long time now. Our main event is Dominic Mysterio's Raw debut, and he debuts on his first Raw match in the main event segment. That is a very impressive thing. The match is incredibly high tempo. It is the Mysterios versus Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy, so it shouldn't surprise anyone how high tempo it is. Dominic Mysterio is able to show a bit more of his wrestling skill, whereas in the street fight it was more storytelling, so it's very nice to see what he can do here, and really helps to show why so many people are high on this guy backstage. The match, however, has a bittersweet ending, as it doesn't come to a clean finish, because Retribution attack, and they do a lot more than they have been doing recently, in that they 1. Stand tall at the end, and 2. Attack an actual person instead of a piece of furniture. Rey and Dominic are laid out to end the segment and end the show. Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy escape. This is a lot better from Retribution, and there are currently big arguments backstage about the best use of Retribution, including whether or not they can use the hacker from SmackDown at least in this storyline, because to my knowledge the original plan for the hacker, which was to have Mustafa Ali eventually unveiled, simply cannot happen anymore, and they do not want Mustafa Ali in Retribution. As such, Retribution are getting very mixed booking, very mixed direction, and really it's very hard to tell what's going to happen for them next, if in fact there is a next, because there is definitely a subsection of WWE management and creative who do not want Retribution on the TVs. I personally didn't mind this Raw. I thought the standard of wrestling was very high, even though the actual wrestling matches were very small. There was also a 6-woman tag match that I've not really commented on there because it's very by the numbers, and once you've seen one Liv Morgan, Ruby Riott and Iconic segment, you've seen them all, regardless of whether Bianca Belair or Zelina Vega are in it. While the quality of wrestling was very high, the actual character development was a bit lacking, outside of, for example, Keith Lee, who did make a very impactful debut, even though they have changed a lot with Keith Lee, including the theme and his attire. This was apparently a decision made by Vince McMahon, who didn't feel that Keith Lee, as he was in NXT, was particularly believable in the main roster, despite booking him in Survivor Series to be exactly how he was. When it comes to the quality of the show, I felt it was overall good, just above okay. However, my Twitter poll plays out very differently. It is probably the most mixed response I've ever had on Twitter. Now, the lowest score was a 12.7% great rating, so that is the lowest score. After that, we have a 28.3% okay, a 29.3% bad, and just edging the win, a 29.7% good. That is heavy. Almost 30% in the negative, almost 30% neutral. Very difficult one to judge, lots of mixed opinions, lots of people not happy with the role that they got, and there were a lot of dodgy match finishes, but the overall quality was high. We got quite a bit of slow character development, at least in a show that was rushed heavily in the build towards Payback. Expect SmackDown to be equally rushed and chaotic. Please let me know what you thought of Raw down in the comments. I've been Tom Colahue, and thank you very much for watching.